Stamford Bridge, an August afternoon, 3,000 kilometers of expectation compressed into 90 minutes. And the scoreboard ends 3-1 in favor of a Chelsea side that finally seemed to have direction under Xabi Alonso. But none of that was the real story. The real story was Enzo Fernandez, 24 years old, World Cup champion, captain of the Argentine national team, being booed by his own supporters before the ball had even been kicked once. Around him, Morgan Rogers, one of the club's biggest recent signings, scored just 11 minutes after stepping onto the pitch, while João Pedro added 2 more goals to complete what should have been a perfect footballing night. And yet the new manager, barely arriving in the job, was given the perfect opportunity after the match to extinguish the fire surrounding his captain, and instead chose, with almost surgical coldness, to say absolutely nothing. That is what we are going to break down over the next few minutes, piece by piece, because what happened that night in London was not an accident, and it was not simply a coincidence of the schedule. It was the accumulated consequence of more than a year of decisions, gestures, and silences that are now exploding at the worst possible moment for a club that needs one thing above everything else: stability. To understand why an entire stadium decided to turn its back on its own captain, we have to go back, and we have to do it carefully, because the story of Enzo Fernandez at Chelsea has never been only about football. From the moment he arrived from Benfica at the beginning of 2023, becoming the most expensive signing in Premier League history at that time, surpassing even the figures Chelsea had spent only weeks earlier on Mykhailo Mudryk, the relationship between the player and the English supporters was defined by something no contract can buy and no salary can repair: trust. And that trust began to crack only a few months after his arrival, when Argentina, with Lionel Messi lifting the trophy, became world champions in Qatar, and Enzo, during celebrations with the victorious national team, took part in a chant containing derogatory references toward French players of African descent, including stars such as Kylian Mbappe and Ousmane Dembele, who had been central figures in that final. The video spread across social media within hours. The reaction was immediate and international, and Enzo was forced to issue a public apology, describing his own words as unacceptable. But by then, the damage had already been done. And in a country like England, where these issues carry enormous sensitivity, the wound remained open far longer than he would have wanted. What followed did little to close it. Months later, during the Copa America in the United States, the Argentine national team again made headlines for reasons unrelated to football when a group of players, including Enzo Fernandez, became involved in another chant making racist references toward French players, an incident that was formally condemned by the French Football Federation and triggered another wave of criticism across Europe, with figures such as Mbappe demanding explanations and serious consequences. Once again, there were apologies. Once again, there was a promise that it would not happen again. And once again, the memory of the incident remained in the minds of supporters who watch every gesture from their idols under a microscope. Then came another major moment when Argentina defeated France on the way to another international triumph, and during the celebrations that followed, footage emerged from inside the dressing room showing several Argentine players, with Enzo Fernandez among them, singing again, this time with flags and gestures connected to the long-running Argentina-United Kingdom dispute over the Falkland Islands. That was the moment the issue stopped being only about racism and began touching an entirely different nerve among English supporters: national identity, and the memory of the 1982 conflict that still carries emotional weight across Britain. On top of all of this came a lesser-known incident, but one that was equally revealing, during a pre-season friendly against Chelsea itself months earlier, when Enzo, playing that match for Argentina, accidentally caught English midfielder Elliot Anderson in the head just minutes after the game had begun. The challenge was punished, it generated controversy at the time, and although it never received the same media attention as the chance, it remained in the memory of the English press as another piece of the larger puzzle. With that history building up, any intelligent footballer would have understood that the following season needed to be, above all else, a season of quiet rebuilding. But what happened during the most recent transfer window was almost the complete opposite. For weeks, several Spanish outlets reported serious interest from Real Madrid in signing Enzo Fernandez at precisely the moment when Chelsea, first under Enzo Maresca and then with the arrival of Xabi Alonso, needed the opposite from its captain: complete commitment, total focus, and his mind on every match. The situation eventually became so tense that Chelsea temporarily left him out of the squad as a disciplinary measure. sending an extremely strong internal message. And the conclusion of that entire transfer saga ended up being humiliating for Enzo himself, because Real Madrid, pressured by the growing media speculation, reportedly issued an official denial of any genuine interest in signing him, leaving the player exposed in front of the football world. This is the environment in which Xabi Alonso arrives at Chelsea as the new manager, replacing Enzo Maresca. And to understand why his arrival automatically turns the Enzo Fernandez situation into a much bigger problem, we first need to understand who Alonso is and what kind of project he wants to build. His coaching career began with the Real Madrid reserve side, and his first major challenge as a senior manager came at Bayer Leverkusen, a club that was struggling near the bottom of the Bundesliga when he arrived. In just over one season, he transformed them into an almost unrecognizable team, with players such as Florian Wirtz, Jeremy Frimpong, and Granit Xhaka becoming symbols of that project, eventually producing the most historic season in the club's entire existence. They won the Bundesliga without losing a single league match, while also lifting the German Cup during the same campaign. And that is where the real problem appears, because in his first official presentation as Chelsea manager at Stamford Bridge, with a convincing 3-1 victory, with Morgan Rogers scoring just 11 minutes after coming onto the pitch, with João Pedro adding 2 more goals, and with players such as Cole Palmer, Moises Caicedo, and Levi Colwill showing clear ideas on the field, everything was there for a new manager to dream about. Yet the public conversation ended up revolving almost entirely around the boos directed at Enzo Fernandez by his own supporters. First, when the stadium announcer read his name in the starting lineup, and then even more intensely when he entered the pitch in the 62nd minute, replacing one of the players who had been receiving the full support of the crowd. After the match came the key moment, the press conference where everyone expected Alonso to publicly stand behind his captain. And what happened was the exact opposite. He spoke about his emotions on making his debut in the home dugout, about the warm reception from the supporters, about his excitement for the project, but not a single word about Enzo Fernandez. No journalist managed to get an explicit defense of the player from him, and that silence, coming from a manager who is known for being extremely deliberate with his public statements, feels less like an accident and more like a decision. Now comes the real examination, with the Premier League season about to move into its most demanding phase. What lies ahead are hostile away grounds, starting with stadiums that contain some of the most intense supporters in English football, many of whom have been waiting for more than a year for the opportunity to face Enzo Fernandez on their own territory. And while that happens outside the club, inside the dressing room Xabi Alonso has to make a decision week after week. Does he continue building around a captain who currently represents Chelsea's biggest source of external controversy? Or does he begin shaping his new project around players such as Morgan Rogers, Cole Palmer, and Moises Caicedo, figures who are either arriving or establishing themselves without the same media baggage, ready to give everything to a collective idea without personal distractions? The question that remains hanging over Chelsea is exactly the one every supporter should be asking right now. Can a project built around complete unity survive with a captain carrying this level of tension with his own supporters? That question is still open, and perhaps the coming weeks will provide the answer. Let me know what you think in the comments, and if you made it this far, do not forget to subscribe to the channel.